Well, I'm Tom Tewell, and I'm 2,000 years old. But I think I look good for 2,000. What do you think? I mean, hey, Andrew Whaley is one of the best preachers I know. So the fact that I've had some influence on him means a lot to me. But believe me, he's mentored me in preaching, even as he says I've mentored him. It was a joy to share the time with your elders and deacons. You have a wonderful and crazy group of officers in this church. They are tremendous, and we laughed together on the weekend. We had a great time together. And I just want to also commend the staff. Not only is Andrew Whaley such a great head of staff and preacher, as you know, but this great staff that he has assembled to work together. They laugh together, they cry together, and I hope you appreciate how unique it is to have a staff who really loves and appreciates and enjoys one another. It's a gift from God, and I just love this church and love being here, and it's an honor and privilege for me to be here today. Our scripture reading today is a life changer. If you would take these words seriously, they would change our lives. Listen for the word of God. Luke chapter 19, 1 and following. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through it. A man was there named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was trying to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was short in stature. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore tree to see Jesus because Jesus was going to pass that way. Now, when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must come to your house today." So Zacchaeus hurried down and was happy to welcome Jesus into his home. All who saw it began to grumble and said, "He's gone in to be the guest of one who is a sinner." Zacchaeus stood there and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, half of my possessions I will give to the poor. And if I've defrauded anyone of anything, I will pay back 4 times as much." Then Jesus said to him, Today, salvation has come to this house, because he too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout. But love and I had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him in. Those words by the poet and author that make a big difference in our lives. It's the poet and author who said those words that really summarize this sermon in one sentence. And the author is, when someone draws a circle and takes you in, what really happens is you really feel like you're walking on the red carpet. Have you ever had that experience where somebody drew a circle that took you in and you felt like somebody was walking on the red carpet with you? They'd rolled out the red carpet for you. My wife Suzanne and I have 7 grandchildren, and they've rolled out the red carpet for us in many ways. Our oldest grandson, Nathan, is a graduate of Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. So he, knowing that I like college basketball, he invited me to come to a Duke game as his guest, got 2 tickets for us for the Duke basketball game against the University of Virginia, and we sat there in the electric atmosphere of Cameron Indoor Arena watching Duke beat Virginia. Now, I got to tell you, sitting with your grandson in a Cameron Indoor Arena, that electric atmosphere, and watching Duke beat Virginia was, for me, a little slice of heaven. But I realize that there are some of you who are Tennessee fans and Virginia fans and Virginia Tech fans and North Carolina fans for whom seeing Duke win a game in Cameron Indoor Arena would be a preview of hell. I know that. Our youngest granddaughter, Collins, also gives us a red carpet welcome. Collins is a little girl, and she is our youngest granddaughter, and she sits with Suzanne, my wife, by the window waiting for me to come. It's a great joy. And when I get there, she sees me coming down the walk. She runs over to the door, lifts her hands up for me to pick me up. I pick her up, and she says these words, "Ah, da, da," which means, "Granddad, you're awesome." I love it. But she rolls out the red carpet for us. I wish I could talk to any of you and ask you, when has God rolled out the red carpet for you? When has someone rolled out the red carpet for you in a way that you could really enjoy it? Well, in the story today, Jesus rolls out the red carpet for a man who is a sinner. He is despised, and people do not like him, and his name is Zacchaeus. And the reason they didn't like him, he was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. He was a chief tax collector in an area called Jericho, and frankly, Jericho was a wealthy tax district. Josephus, the early church historian, says that the tax district around Jericho was so wealthy that it was a lucrative tax district because it had balsam trees. It was the fattest district in all of Palestine, Josephus said, meaning it was the wealthiest district. People there were very wealthy from the balsam trees and the roses, but there was commerce. It was on a trade route. So it was a hustle and bustle in Jericho as everybody came to trade their goods and so forth. And Zacchaeus was the chief tax collector of this lucrative region, this wealthy region in Palestine. And so he negotiated with the Roman government. Remember, Zacchaeus is a Jew, and he negotiates with the Roman government to whatever the tax rate would be. As long as, this is why the system was lent itself to abuse, as long as he gave to the Roman government the amount of money that they required, he could charge the people whatever he wanted. So, for example, if he negotiated $15 million for this lucrative tax district around Jericho, he could collect $20 million from the people, give $15 million to the Roman government, give $3 million to the tax collectors who worked for him, and keep $2 million to him for himself. Can you see why he was despised and rejected by the people? Do you know in that day they grouped tax collectors, robbers, thieves, sinners, and adulterers all in the same group? And tax collectors were not allowed in the synagogue. They couldn't worship. So Zacchaeus is a wealthy but a lonely man. He's got all this money, but he's got nobody with whom to spend it. And so he wants to see who Jesus is. And I think this shows that Zacchaeus has a heart for God. The people didn't see this, but I think as I read the story and study it, I think Zacchaeus has a heart for God. Why do I say this? Because he goes to see God. He goes to climb up the sycamore tree to see Jesus. He's short of stature, so he can't see him over the crowd. He's trying to see him over the crowd, but he can't see him. And so he climbs up a sycamore tree to see Jesus because Jesus is going to come by that way. Zacchaeus was always worried about the crowds for fear they'd kick him and they'd punch him and they'd give him a little butt here and there. And Zacchaeus was always worried about this. So he climbs up in a sycamore tree. Sycamore trees have wide, leafy branches. And there's a good place to hide. So he thought, I could see Jesus from afar, but I wouldn't have to get too involved. I wonder if Zacchaeus knew that Jesus was a friend of tax collectors and sinners. I wonder if he knew when he thought about it, as he heard about Matthew being one of the 12 disciples, and that Jesus actually went to his home. I wonder if Zacchaeus knew that about Matthew, that he was a tax collector, and he'd hosted Jesus and other tax collectors and sinners in his home. I wonder if that's on Zacchaeus' mind as he climbs that sycamore tree to hide so he can see Jesus from afar, but not get too close. And then the shocking movement in the story is that Jesus comes right to the limb in which he is located, and Jesus looks up and calls him by name, Zacchaeus, come down. I wonder how Jesus knew Zacchaeus' name. Did he know it by divine revelation because he's the Son of God, the Son of Man? I think Jesus sees the teachable moment, like we do with our children. When something happens, we seize the teachable moment. And Jesus realized as the crowd was murmuring and grumbling about Zacchaeus up there, I think they were saying, what's Zacchaeus doing up there? He's come to see our Jesus. He's an outcast. He's a sinner. Why is he up there? And then when Jesus walks over to that limb, I think the first thing the crowd thought was, oh, good. Jesus is going to call him down, and now this is going to be good. He's going to discipline Zacchaeus, give him what for, tell him he's a sinner, and he's going to really bawl him out and scold him. But Jesus doesn't do any of that. Zacchaeus, come down, for I must stay at your house today. And the crowd is grumbling and they're murmuring, because to be the guest of someone and have a meal with them, be in their home, is a sign of brotherhood, sisterhood, neighborhood. So this is an odd thing that Jesus is drawing a circle that takes this person in when they've drawn a circle to shut him out, and they made arrangements so he couldn't be in the temple and couldn't worship God. And they're drawing a circle that's shutting him out, but Jesus draws a circle that takes Zacchaeus in. It's a moment of grace in his life. Did Jesus, wouldn't you love to be a fly on the ointment in the wall and see what Jesus does with Zacchaeus at the home? Did Jesus bawl Zacchaeus out? I don't think so. I think Jesus listened to Zacchaeus. I think it was maybe the first time somebody looked him in the eye and heard his story. And whatever the story was, it was a moment of grace. I think Zacchaeus really felt Jesus' love and grace and acceptance. And then Zacchaeus says, look, Lord, if I've defrauded anybody of anything, I'm going to restore it fourfold. And before that, I'm going to give half of my goods to the poor. And if I've defrauded anybody of anything, I'm going to pay it back fourfold. Exodus and Numbers and Deuteronomy said certain amounts in the Jewish law to do. If you've defrauded somebody, you pay it back the amount you stole or twice as much. But nobody said go 4 times as much. Zacchaeus went way beyond what the law had said. And so in that moment, I really believe that Zacchaeus experienced a moment of grace. I would love to take a walk with every one of you here around Roanoke, Virginia, and ask you today, when have you had a moment of grace in your life? When has God come into your life and actually given you a moment of grace? When have you gotten away from being categorized by what you make or what you do or what you have, and somebody sees into your soul and just loves you for who you are? I'd love to know a moment of grace in your life. When someone loved you as you are, I believe that's what Zacchaeus experienced. He experienced the love and the grace, the unconditional love of God. I experienced the love and grace of God in New York City some time ago when Jimmy Carter came to New York City. We were going to build the 100th house for Habitat for Humanity. I was chairing a committee to raise money for it. We had lots of people there to build these homes for the poor. And Jimmy and Rosalind Carter rode on the bus from Plains, Georgia to New York City. They didn't take a private jet or a helicopter or anything like that. They came up by bus from Plains, Georgia to New York City. And they came, and Jimmy Carter got off the bus, and Rosalind, everybody applauded for them. And they said to the crowd something we didn't expect to hear. They said, on the bus, we talked to all the people on the bus. We met this young couple, and they were so lovely, and they just got married. And they took their honeymoon money and their honeymoon time, and they came to New York City to build houses for the poor. And Rosalind and I thought, what a wonderful thing. This couple gave their money and their time for their honeymoon to come here to New York City to care for the poor. And Rosalind and I are going to stay tonight over at the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. And this young couple is going to be at the Harlem YMCA. She's going to stay with the women. He's going to stay with the men. And we don't think that's right for their honeymoon. So Rosalind and I have decided we are going to give the suite, the presidential suite at the Waldorf Astoria, to this young couple so they can have their honeymoon. They'll build homes for the poor during the day, but they can stay at the Waldorf Astoria at night in a comfortable spot. And Rosalind will stay with the women, and I'll stay with the men at the Harlem YMCA. It'll be wonderful. And everybody, when they heard that generous act of hospitality and generosity and grace from Jimmy Carter, everybody applauded and applauded and applauded, except the Secret Service. And when the Secret Service heard that, they said, whoa, what's going to happen? How are we going to keep the Carters safe at the Harlem Y? But they made arrangements for it. And at the end of the evening, I saw one of the Secret Service, and I said, were you surprised and shocked by that? He smiled. He shook his head. He said, no, I wasn't surprised. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, when you work on the Carters detail, you just have to wonder about them. He said, it's as if they operate by a different value system than the rest of us. It's just as if they're operating under different rules and different guidelines. It's like all of us operate by the standards of the world, but the Carters have another value system. Next week, you're going to be in your beautiful, new, remodeled sanctuary. It's going to be wonderful. I had a peek in there. But when you come and dedicate your pledges, I hope you also dedicate your time as Will did today. What a wonderful gift that you gave to those people with your dance and all that choreography. What a wonderful gift. I hope you'll give your money and your time as a way of saying to God, God, I'm giving you my whole life. I hope you'll give it that way. So that the people of Roanoke, Virginia, who are in their hiding places, some of them up a tree, some of them hiding behind busyness, some of them hiding behind wealth, some of them hiding behind a job or whatever it is they're hiding behind, some of them hiding behind something they've done they don't want anybody else to know about. I hope that you will come in and say, I want to give generously so that those people can feel welcome here at the Raleigh Court Presbyterian Church in Roanoke. In New York City some years ago, there was a man named Tom Crofus. He was our head usher at Fifth Avenue Church. Some of you may have met him if you visited. A lot of you, I know, visited there. But Tom bought a red carpet because at Fifth Avenue we had a red carpet that went down the center aisle, but he wanted to extend that red carpet on Homecoming Sunday. So when everybody came back after the summer break, he put the red carpet down the center aisle, but they also put it out through the narthex, down the steps, out into the sidewalk, and put it 20 or 25 feet each way down the sidewalk. So on Homecoming Sunday, when we had brass and timpani and our children's choir and our adult choir and the organ, it was wonderful, that everybody would come and hear the music, and they'd come in the red carpet and feel like they were welcomed. So Tom's there waiting for the church. The service is packed. Everybody's there, and the organ begins, and the timpani and the brass and the strings. And Tom opens all the doors so everybody can hear all the music out in New York. And Tom sees a woman walking down the street of New York, down Fifth Avenue, like this. She's walking down, and she's looking down at the ground. And then she hears the music, and she steps up. And she takes another step, and another step, and another step. And soon she's halfway up the steps, and she's listening to this glorious music. So Tom is the head usher. He goes over to her and says, "I'm Tom Crofus. Would you mind telling me your name?" She said, "I'm Donna." He said, "Donna, would you like to come in? Here's a bulletin." She said, "No, thanks. I'm not religious." So he backs away from her. But he's watching her. She goes up a step, up a step. Now she's on the narthex level, and she's coming into the narthex, listening to this glorious music. And the other ushers want to go over and welcome her and seat her, but Tom said, "No, don't get near her. She's not religious." So she goes into the narthex, and Tom Crofus puts a chair up in the narthex, right by the door, and not in the sanctuary, in the narthex, so she can be in the narthex. She doesn't have to go in the sanctuary with all the religious people. She's out in the narthex. So he puts the chair up, and then he just motions to her. She could sit there if she wants to. And she goes over to the chair, and she sits down. It's amazing. And the service begins, and I give my sermon, and during my sermon, I talk about a woman who felt excluded from the church. She thought she'd committed an unforgivable sin. And she had never been back to the church in like 20 years, but she was invited to a concert at Fifth Avenue Church in New York City. She came to the concert, not to a religious service, came to the concert, and she experienced God's grace and forgiveness, and she got involved in Fifth Avenue, and I said, "That's the kind of church we are. We're a welcoming church. We're an inclusive church. We want to welcome everybody. We hope you feel welcome." Well, this woman, as she was hearing this story about the woman who felt excluded because she committed an unforgivable sin, this woman, Donna, on the chair out in the narthex, her tears are streaming down her face. Her mascara's running. She opens her purse trying to find a tissue, and there's no tissue in there. But Tom Crofus sees this, and he goes over with a clean laundered handkerchief, and he just goes over to her and just offers it to her, drops it in her lap, and then he backs away because she's not religious. He backs away from her. He doesn't want to get too near her. She takes the Kleenex, and she takes the handkerchief, wipes her brow and the mascara. She motions to Tom, "Thank you." The service ends, and I go down to give the benediction in the center aisle. As I'm giving the benediction, Tom goes over to this woman, and he says, "Now, the guy notice he doesn't use any religious language. The guy who just gave that talk, he's going to be walking down here in a minute. I know he wants to say hi to you. Would you mind if he came over and said hi? Just if you motion to me, I'll have him come over to you." And she said, I'd be happy to meet him. So Tom, as I'm giving the benediction, he's standing right in the center aisle, and he's going like this. And I knew Donna was sitting over there, so he motions to me, so I knew that I had to go over. But I don't know any of the story. I just walk over toward her. As I come over to her, I said, "I'm Tom Tewell. Happy you came today." And she said, "I'm Donna." And she said, "I really enjoyed the service, but I've got 2 questions for you." I said, "What are the 2 questions?" She said, "Well, you mentioned that woman who wanted to be forgiven. That's actually my story. A Roman Catholic priest told me I didn't belong in the church, and I could not be forgiven, and I shouldn't come back to the church, and that was my experience." And she started to cry. She said, "So is forgiveness possible?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, it is. I believe it with all my heart. It's possible. It's what everybody can have if they'll accept from Jesus Christ. He wants to forgive us." She said, "Can I ask you another question?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Who is the red carpet for?" I said, "Why do you ask?" She said, "Well, because I love music." And she said, "That's what drew me in. But I'm thinking, the red carpet in New York City, there's got to be some celebrity here. There's got to be somebody who's a special person." So I'm thinking to myself, maybe Yo-Yo Ma is here. So I'm thinking maybe Yo-Yo, I could see him in church. I love his music. Maybe somebody famous like that from the New York Philharmonic. So I'm drawn in. So who was the red carpet for? What do you think I told her? The red carpet is for you. And I had the privilege, before I moved away from New York City, to baptize Donna in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, as she experienced the forgiveness and the grace for which Jesus Christ is famous. How many people do you think live within a 1-mile radius of this Raleigh Court Presbyterian Church in Roanoke, Virginia? How many people live within a 1-mile, 2-mile, 3-mile, 4-mile, 5-mile radius of this wonderful church who are like Donna or like that woman I mentioned in the sermon, who feel excluded from the church, who feel like people have drawn a circle and shut them out? I hope next week, when you dedicate your sanctuary, when you offer your tithes and offerings, I hope and pray that when you walk in and dedicate your life and your money and your time, that you will do it for the people who feel left out, wanting everybody to come in and experience this love and grace of God for which Jesus Christ is famous. It might just change their life if you do that. He drew a circle that shut me out, heretic, rebel, a thing to flout, but love and I, Jesus and I, had the wit to win. We drew a circle that took him, her, everybody in. May it be so. Amen.